Thank you. So we have around 10 minutes. So if you have any question, I'd like to invite all the presenters, including myself, to come the stage. So if you have any question, comments.
I have a question for Pam. Like, you are working on the digital framework workers to find it out that how the digital platform is working. Did you take any interview of the contractual childcare worker, those work through the digital platform as a contractual worker with lots of staffing, as I said, the childcare sector? And if you want to interview, definitely we have a lot of people that we can provide it. Because these are the women-driven job, and that job is totally make women as a Uber nanny to working, floating from one center to the another center. And it's very similar to your work. That can give you more eye-opening data and help you to understand, and also other understand, that how women-driven profession becomes so gig and so profit-driven by the staffing agency, how they're grinding over there. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So in looking at their type of contract, I had specific platforms that were eligible, and those were ones that explicitly said the care worker was an independent contractor or self-employed. And then also in a screening before I interviewed the participants, I asked if the positions that they had, if they were employees or if they were self-employed, and then asked if they declared income and so forth. So with the positioning of independent contractor, the workers who were hired in home care actually have legal rights to be employees under Ontario legislation when they're providing domestic care. But many of them were not aware of that or preferred to work as self-employed workers. And with the second part of your question, if I'm understood correctly, is it about opportunities?
I think we should do a research to find out how
Very interesting, yes. So the temporary agencies actually are reinforcing this as a type of work as opposed to employment. And I imagine it does also have a very big impact in the childcare. I did focus primarily on elderly care providers, but there are many more platforms like nanny.ca and a variety that are used for childcare too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your presentations. You know, when I listen to all of you, what I think about is how we have seen this incredible shift in the last, let's say, 40 years to essentially an individualization of work, a contracting out, which is all about saving, you know, the big corporations, or however you want to identify it, money, and having them no longer have responsibility, really. So I just, you know, each of you is taking a piece, and I wonder, do you put it together at some point for some kind of overarching, you know, national, provincial, whatever it is, campaign that seeks to shift our society towards one that does not have these kinds of things?
Thank you. So who will answer this question?
I think that's an excellent idea. The first thought is, you know, where is all of our standard employment, secure jobs? Where are they going? And they're quickly disappearing, especially those that provide good benefits, you know, security long-term. But I think it's, you know, when I asked the women in my study, you know, would they like to leave what they're doing for regular jobs, most of them still hold on to the self-employment dream. So it's almost like, how can we bring more security to that, you know, to these job structures that are still unfortunately quite individualized and solo, but they still seem to prefer that to working in regular employment spaces. And I think, that speaks to also, you're talking about decades of the loss of, these types of jobs. But women have experienced, especially women, like discrimination over decades that have pushed them out of those workplaces, especially, for caregivers, right? So in what ways can we make those self-employed and individualized jobs less isolated, less invisible, and less dangerous? I don't know the answer to that. People have talked about unionizing, and there are movements to unionize self-employed work. And I don't know much about how that looks or how successful it is, but those are thoughts that I have. Sorry.
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of undocumented people working also through these platforms because it's it's deregulated, so it's easy to get in. And in fact, that's true because of people are so isolated. It's hard to have a global or bigger movement. But they were a few campaigns, especially I'm thinking of Foodora. They were trying to unionize, I think, in Toronto. And in the end, the company just shut it down when they succeeded unionizing. So there is also challenges to these movements of solidarity. But yeah, it would be a good idea to maybe do something for the future about that.
Just add one more thing. When it comes to caregiving, there is already, even in employment, that gendered devaluation of social reproductive care work. And some of the workers that I spoke with thought, well, we can do better ourselves. We can be more appreciated. And in some cases, there were workers who found a good relationship with a family or in a certain situation. But the overall value that society places on that type of work is an issue, even in bringing attention to it.
Well, thank you all for your presentations. There's so much injustice in this area that is very demoralizing, but it's very good to see some very competent people who are asking the right questions and looking at the right things. And that makes me feel good. One of the things that particularly shocked me that I didn't know was in your presentation, Noémie, that undocumented workers are not considered legally to be workers or covered by workers' compensation. That's not the case in Ontario, and I was absolutely shocked to hear that that's the case in Quebec. I don't know if that's related to Quebec's legal control over immigration or how that happened. I'm just curious, but thank you for explaining that.
It's again, it's still super minimal. I would wish the coverage be more open and generous, but as I was explaining, it's only a few migrants that can have access to the compensation when they believe they can work. When they were, let's say, the Enrique's case was a guy that renewed his work permit after the expiration date. So during the meantime, the work permit was processed, he had that accident. So during that period, he was not allowed to work. But because he thought he was allowed to work, then they gave him the compensation. And to this date, these conditions are still applying. So most of the undocumented workers that know they are undocumented, that know they can't work legally, they cannot have access to it. And I don't think it's related to the Quebec immigration system, but more to the civil law in Quebec, according to work. So, yeah. But yeah, we're fighting to have it more open and to have more cases going through, but still it's difficult to convince people to go and to try it because people are afraid. So
Awful, but thank you for trying.
Thank you, everybody. So it was a nice discussion. And this is the end of this plenary session. Thank you.